Hi, it's Kathy with City Farmhouse Studio. Today I want to talk to you about this open front, curved collar, put your records on cardigan. The link to the patterns are in the description below. So for this project, I did use the Patton's Classic Wool Worsted. It is 100% wool yarn, 3.5 ounces, 100 grams, 194 yards to 177 meters. It is a category 4, and I did get 11 wraps per inch whenever I wrapped it around a ruler. So if that helps you get a little more detailed of a yarn substitute. So for the pattern, you're going to begin with waste yarn, and I've gone ahead and cast on a ravel cord. For setting up with the garter rows at the bottom, I will be hand transferring those stitches and just having this in between where I'm transferring and the cast on comb helps tremendously. I do have my row counter set to 0. My carriage is on the right, and for my machine and this yarn to get the gauge, I had it set at a tension 7, but since garter rows are a little bit wider, I want to take it down one whole number. So my carriage now I've adjusted to be at 6. And then I'm going to E-wrap cast on. So I'm going to pull all the needles that it says for in the pattern for your size. I'm just doing a small sample here, but then I will be E-wrapping each of these needles. And I'll slide each of those wraps back behind the latches. And to then begin with the garter stitches, you're going to knit 2 rows. And then once you have your 2 rows complete, this is where you're going to start your hand transferring. Now this is for the front right panel. So the opening is going to be at this edge. We will be doing our arm decreases later on this side. So after knitting 2 rows, the instructions said to start at the 7th stitch in on the left. And why that is these first 6 stitches will become our edging. There'll be a rib pattern. So starting on that 7th stitch, I'm going to drop it and transfer it to be a purl on the right side of the work. And I'm going to do that on down the row. Since the edgings are going to be columns of either knit or purl stitches, you can drop those later and do more rows all at once. So that's why you don't see any instructions for transferring those right away. These first 6 rows of all the panels are kind of the tedious ones where you are transferring the purls. And then of course at the collar on the front panels to get what goes around your neck. Takes a little bit more time to transfer all of these by hand, but the speed of when we knit the stockinettes sure makes up time for it compared to knitting it all by hand. Now since this last stitch will be seamed into the side edges of the garment attaching this panel to the back, this stitch will not be visible. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it as is. It also is very kind of, it can get a little tricky and cumbersome to transfer the edge stitches to purls. So I'm going to leave that as is. So once you've finished all of the hand transfers, you're going to head and knit 2 more rows and repeat that until you have 6 rows on your counter So after you've knit those 2 rows, starting again at the 7th, we'll drop those and transfer the same stitches back to purls. So I've finished transferring all the stitches. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next step, but you would go ahead and repeat those 2 rows and transferring the same stitches so that there are 6 rows on your row counter. The next paragraph is where you go into the main portion of the body for stockinette. And for that, I want to readjust my tension on my carriage. So I'm going to add 2 clicks back up to what I had for the stockinette gauge. So that's 7. And then it's going to say to knit so many rows, stopping every so often to transfer all of the edge stitches, the 2nd, 4th, and 6th, to be purl column. So I'm just going to go ahead and knit a few rows. And I would stop here. I usually go till where it's, easy to work with and I'm not working down by my knees. But just so I have a little bit more, I drop 1 stitch all the way down and can work it all the way back up in one go. And this time I'm going to start with the 2nd stitch in from the end. And I'm going to just drop that all the way down. I'm going to follow that column, and where the ravel cord is, I'm going to insert my hook. I like the larger, the latch transfer tool. I'm going to insert that into that loop, making sure to get the E-wrap cast on. And I'm just going to open those stitches all the way up. You kind of sometimes have to work the bottom ones out. So there you can see on the latch tool, I currently only have the E-wrap and the ravel cord. And all the other stitches that we've opened are almost like little ladder rungs. I'm going to go to the very bottom one and catch it and pull through. And do that all the way up. And then do that for the 4th. Follow that column down. And then the 6th column. So you are essentially making a 1x1 rib that runs the entire length of the opening. And it has 3 knit stitches, 3 purls. All right. And then I'll continue doing that, knitting a few rows and then transferring up. All right, so those are all complete. And now I'm to the section where I'm going to start binding off on this side of the bed. And that's going to create the opening for our set-in sleeves. It really makes that sleeve set in nice and you don't get extra fabric bunching under your arm. So the instructions tell you to bind off 2 to 5 stitches depending on your size. And I will do 3, so just put 1 stitch over, that's 1, pull it through, transfer that over, so that would be 2 stitches I've bound off, pull through, and then move this one over for my third one, and I will leave that there because as it knits, it will knit those two together. So that would be the first section of the bind off, and then it tells you to knit one row. And then the instructions say to decrease one stitch opposite side of this carriage. So again, on the same side, I'm just going to move that one stitch over, one needle, and that creates a nice gentle slope to seam into. We don't just get these stair steps. It helps smooth everything out. And then I'm going to knit one row back. And I didn't have that out of work, so I tried to knit that. And then it tells you to knit off or bind off again 1, 2, 3 stitches. So I will do 2. So again, pull one over and knit that off. And move it over 1. So that is 1. 2 stitches bound off. Make sure that didn't get caught. Knit 1 row and then go ahead and knit 1 off that, move it over and come back. Now in this section it does tell you to work a total of 1 to 3 times. So if it tells you to do only once, that was the one time you've completed, so you would move on to the next step. The other sizes where it has 2, you'd go ahead and repeat once more. If it tells you to repeat it 3, you've already done 1, so you need to complete it twice more. And it tells you the row count and the stitch number to make sure you have. Again, continue as you're going. Check an eye on these stitches to see how far down they are if you need to go ahead and transfer those. Once you've completed all of these stitches to be bound off, it tells you to do either one or the largest size, the 5X, you do 2 stitches bound off. So I'll just do 1. I'm going to knit my row. And then for the smaller half of the sizes, so extra small to extra large, you will not be moving this stitch over 1 to decrease 1. But the 4 largest sizes, the 2X to 5X, you would go ahead and move that over. And then it tells you to knit 1 row. And then for the smaller sizes, you have an additional line item. And that tells you to knit an additional 2 rows along in that section. And then it will tell you how many times to repeat it to continue with those decreasing slants. Now for sizes small through 5X, so extra small, you do not do this step. You will all be binding off 1 stitch and knitting 1 row. Only the 5X would be moving 1 in. And then for sizes small through extra large, you would go ahead and knit those 2 rows again to make it 1 stitch every 4 rows. The larger sizes, you do not. And then it again tells you how many times to repeat that with your row count and how many stitches you would be in work. So that creates, you can already see, a nice arc that would be for your underarm. And then it will tell you to knit so many rows. And again, you can see I'm keeping an eye on this. It's gotten down far enough, so I need to transfer my edge stitches. So once you've knit your full set of rows to get from the bottom of the arms shaping a little bit more depth, now we're going to want to start shaping that curve that goes around the collar. So to do this, what we're going to be doing is taking this stitch that runs right inside of the last purl, we'll be moving that in one, and then moving all of these kind of columns for the edging in one as well to take that empty needle out. So everything just kind of scoots over one stitch. So we decrease one stitch, kind of shuffle everything in. That keeps our edging, the ribbing, all consistent, and our decreases will be hidden a little bit. So it tells you in the instructions to move 7 far left side stitches in one stitch towards the center. So I need to move the 3 of the edging plus the 1 we want to decrease. So I'm just taking a single one, moving that in, and then my 3-prong transfer tool. I will take the first stitches off, move those in one, and then the last 3. Want to make sure that needle we emptied is all the way out of work. And then it will tell you to knit 4 rows and repeat it again. Here you really want to make sure the yarn does not get caught in your weaving wheels. And to repeat it again, those 7 stitches. Move the 1 over. Now move the 3. Those. 3 of those. Make sure my empty needle is out of work. And knit 4 rows. All right, so now it tells you basically the same thing, except instead of 4 rows, we'll only knit 2. Make sure that needle's out of work. So my 2 rows. And then this next section is a little bit confusing of what you are doing. We will bind off a chunk of stitches, and that is going to be what is sewn into your back for your shoulder edge. And then we will E-wrap back on. And this section is what will become what's in the back of your neck. It wraps around and will sew into the back of the neck of the sweater. So here is the left side of the garment, but it's complete and on the same side. So you can see this is what you would bind off. It sews into the back of the garment. And then we are adding on this section of the neck that connects all the way around to the front, and it will seam into the back with the other side. So here's the back neck edge of the back panel, and this new section of both sides come in to seam. All right, so how to do that? We'll be binding off your set number of shoulder stitches. And these you want to bind off super tight, but you don't want to bind off super loose either, because this is what will help give structure across the body, across your shoulders. Again, this will be knitted off, so I'm not going to knit off that last double stitch. But now I want to E-wrap cast on my stitches. So here's what has the double stitch for the decrease. Starting with the next one, I just wrap over those. And this is going to cast on for what goes behind the neck. And then you knit 2 rows. And then after 1 row, I just go ahead and take one of my claw weights, hang it just to help give that extra weight. And there's my 2 rows. So now you can see my collar edge, my shoulder edge, and then this will wrap back along this way on the back side of the garment for the back of your neck. So now we just continue moving those 7 stitches, 3, 6, 7, as we did before, to continue on. Oh, come on. The curve for the front edge. Make sure everything's out of work that needs to be in work. And then knit 2 rows. All sizes would go ahead and repeat that 6 more times, or 5 more times, a total of 6. And then the 7th, or after that, instead of knitting 2 rows, you knit 1. So as we're decreasing the rows in between our moves, that curve is getting sharper. And that didn't work. So there's my 1 row. Move these. Make sure that's how to work. And then you will repeat that 3 more times. All right, so now that I have all those stitches transferred, so we're getting further down. This last little paragraph is the most complicated of the entire pattern, not because you are doing anything different, it is because everything's coming in all at once. So we will be having our edging move in a stitch, or actually more than a stitch. We'll be having our edging move in a couple stitches. We'll still have the columns we need to keep an eye on. And we are going to go ahead and start our purl garter stitch rows for that end of the collar, for the neck, for the end of the neckline. So there's all these different components that you got to make sure you're doing right, or else you're going to be going back. So just doing it step by step. We're going to take, since it is the garter stitch, we're going to take our carriage dial back down, 1 whole tension number. And for this section, we want to decrease 2 stitches. So how we were moving the 7th over onto the 8th, we want the 8th to go onto the 9th, and the 7th onto the 9th. So that's the 2 stitches in towards the center. Now we're going to take all of our edge stitches, those 6 stitches, and move those into so that they fill up those empty needles. All right. Now I want to make sure the two that I've emptied are out of work. And I'm going to knit one row. And now I want to decrease one. So just like we did on the arm opening, how we had it multiple decrease on one row and then only one on the next one to get a gentle curve and not a stair step, we want to do that again. So again, that 7th stitch moves to the 8th. The 6 ribbing edge stitches move in 1 stitch, fill the opening, make sure that's out of place. I'm going to knit 1 row. Now, so don't forget, now we need to transfer the purl stitches. So starting with the 7th stitch in, I want to go through both of those decreased stitches. So this is kind of tricky. You need to get through both of those stitches without splitting yarn, Kathy. All right. I'm going to drop that stitch and transfer the remaining ones. To be purls. Again, this last stitch will be seamed in the back, so you don't need to worry about transferring it. So we've moved the 2 over, we've knit a row, we've moved the 1 over, we knit a row, and we have the purls. So now we are ready to knit, to repeat that 2 more times to get our 6 rows of garter stitch. So again, the 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. I didn't plan this out too well. The 8th goes on to the 9th. The 7th goes on to the 9th. And then your 6th. Edges move in 2. Make sure out of work. Knit row. You would go ahead and move that 1 stitch over. Since I don't have that many stitches, so my very last stitch I'm going to leave there. Otherwise I wouldn't have anything to transfer to purls. So now again, you want to go in, make sure you go through both of those 2 sides, 2 loops when you transfer to your purls. And you're going to repeat that once more, making sure your row count and your stitches and work are correct. At the very end, make sure all your edgings are transferred in to your rib columns. All right, so there we have our curve and our decreases. And then you'll bind off again all your stitches and work. This one you do want loosely because this is what curves around your neckline in the opening. So you definitely don't want it too tight. But on these purls or the edge stitches, I like the appearance of them a little bit tighter because then it kind of pulls it in a little bit more and you don't get as drastic of a point. And it just kind of cinches it all in together. And then once more to cut the yarn. So on the pattern, again, you can see here is our shoulder where we bound off, the curves going into the neckline, those decreases by the edge ribbing. And then up at the top, here is where we had the 3 stitches every 2 rows, the bind off 2, bind off 1, bind off 2, bind off 1, and the purl stitches. And then binding off a little bit tighter on those rib stitches, and it just tucks that in nice and neat. So how that curves up and around, goes around the back for a nice collar. So for the other side of the garment, how we had our purl columns over here, we want to have them on this side. And where we had our arm shaping on this side, we want them on this side. And to help you do that is whenever you have your waist yarn and your ravel cord, instead of having your carriage on the right, you're going to have it on the left. And instead of E-wrapping from left to right, you will be wrapping right to left, which is a little bit different, but you go in between the 2 end needles and wrap away from the carriage. Go between the next 2 blank ones, wrap away from the carriage. Go between the 2 blank ones, wrap away. And you continue doing that for your cast on. And then this tail goes straight into your carriage. And you're ready to knit for your garter stitches. Now, one thing you got to remember is out of habit, most patterns end with your even rows on your right side. Your even rows will now end on your left. So it's exactly the same pattern. It's just switching where your carriage is at. So for the back, you begin with your waist yarn, your ravel cord, E-wrap cast on from left to right, carriage on right, and everything between the 2 edge stitches are transferred to purls every 2 rows. So we don't have to worry about the edge columns because these stitches will be sewn into your front sides. So we're essentially making a stockinette panel with a garter stitch edging at the bottom, 6 rows of that. So I've gone ahead, done the garter stitch, and then changed my carriage to be the stockinette gauge, knit so many rows in stockinette, and now we're ready to begin those shaping for the armholes. So if you remember on the front, you just have the shaping on one side. Now we need to have them going on at both ends. So to decrease, just like on your arm sky on the front, we'll start decreasing your set number of stitches on the side by the carriage. And then it tells you for all the sizes to decrease 1 stitch on the opposite side. And then we will knit 1 row. And then we do the same set of decreases, but this time on the opposite side of the garment. And then knit 1 row again. And then most of the sizes for the next step tell you to decrease 1 stitch on each side. The larger sizes will decrease more. Knit 1 and then repeat that row. Knit 1. And then again, you're going to bind off or decrease 1 on the side of this carriage. 5x, you do 2. And then only on 2x up would you decrease on this side. And then you repeat once. But then on this little paragraph, you do have where the extra small through size medium does go ahead and knit 2 rows. And that just helps slow down your rate of decreases. For sizes small through 5X, you do repeat the next size, and that is again the decrease of 1 on the side of the carriage. Again, only 5X, you would move in on the opposite side. And then you repeat that. And then from extra small to extra large, you knit 2 rows again. And then it will tell you to repeat that section based on your size. And that completes your shaping for the arm sky. So you can see you get a nice shaping, and it should mirror what you did on the front panel. Then you will go ahead and knit your straight rows in stockinette and bind off. Now to bind off, again, just like the front, you don't want it to be too tight or too loose. You want it to be that just right, that the Goldilocks story. Just want it right so that it's not too tight or too loose to fit on your shoulder. So sometimes that is a little bit of a trial and error. So for the sleeve, it begins very much like the back, where you set up for your garter stitch, tension down 1, and knit your 6 rows. Reset your carriage to your stockinette stitch, but instead of continuing straight up for the panels, we need to start increasing for your sleeves. And to do that, the instructions say to increase 1 stitch on each side of work. And how I do that is you have your stitch that goes into your needle, and then the loop that is below it, you want to go into that, and then bring that out and up to the needle next to it, and that would be our increase of 1. I'm going to do that the same on this side. And then you knit your desired rows that it tells you to knit. And then you continue on increasing. So again, you go into the stitch that is below the stitch on your needle, pull it out, do the same on this side, pull it out, and then knit your rows. And that will get your increase coming out. You can already start to see my increase. Yours will be much slower because you'll have additional rows than just the 2. You'll repeat that to your specified stitches, the specified row count, and then just like the back, you'll be binding off multiple stitches. Move this stitch in 1. Knit a row, do your multiple stitches, move this in 1, and continue on those repeats. The only thing different is there is a second set to get the cap up at the top of the sleeve. So you have the larger set of decreases, a straight section, and then the decreases up at the very top of your sleeve to finish the curve. And then you just bind off the few stitches that are remaining. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this pattern tutorial. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss out on any other patterns from City Farmhouse Studio. Bye!